You get booed in your own house, and the world leans in to watch what you do next. Do you stare down the noise? Do you smirk, deflect, or fold? Mike McDaniel stood under the Hard Rock lights on Thursday night and did something oddly simple. He answered like a man who knows the pain, but still believes the work matters. Yeah, personally, you want to dictate the terms, he said. You want to fix stuff, and yeah, it sucks. That sucks. All of that does. But I think it's a pretty consistent formula of fans enjoy winning. And so our expectation is that we have to do the work and do the right things for fans to enjoy the experience. And unfortunately, we didn't do that tonight. So we got to get back to work to give them something to cheer about. That's an honest sentence. It's not a rallying cry, not a resignation. It's the sound of someone trying to translate shame into a to-do list. Picture the scene. A stadium built on sunshine and flash turns sour. Chants of disappointment replace the tailgate beats. The faces in the stands are both accusation and plea. Coaches live in those moments. They are judged by them. McDaniel's staff and players heard the boos the way a church hears thunder. Loud, public, impossible to ignore. And he faced the microphones and said what coaches rarely do in the heat of the collapse. He named the feeling, and he named the target: work. Not excuses, not spin. Work. There's a deeper, quieter theater happening behind that sentence. McDaniel is no stranger to genius billing. He arrived with a reputation for inventive offense, for motion and misdirection that made defenses look like they'd learned the wrong dance steps. He didn't win fans by default. He won them with a style that felt different, modern, and daring. But styles require scaffolding, linemen who can hold, a secondary that can cover, a front office that builds depth. When one pillar cracks, the choreography fails. Fans see the missteps and don't always see why they happened. They only know the result: loss. So when McDaniel says we have to do the work, he's nodding at the fundamentals the city watches from the stands and the boardrooms that sign the contracts. This is where the story gets thorny. The owner, the GM, the draft picks, the injury lists, all are actors in this scene. Chris Grier's departure and the uncertainty that follows means someone else will be sketching the roster's future while the coach still holds the playbook. That dynamic creates a pressure valve that only so many players can handle before they hiss. Fans smell it, players feel it in practice, coaches absorb it in private meetings. McDaniel isn't the only one in the room with responsibility, but he's the one the public hears when things go wrong. So what do you do when your leader tells you to do the work after being booed? You can take it as a call to arms or a polite prelude to change. There are models that work. Coaches who double down on identity, simplify what no longer works, and build a culture that can swallow losing and spit out learning. There are other models where loyalty becomes inertia, where the same rituals keep playing while the deficiencies grow more obvious. Which path Miami chooses will be visible in the small things: practice intensity, who plays, whether meetings have teeth, and whether accountability is private or performative. There's a human dimension in McDaniel's line that the headlines miss. Saying it sucks is not an Olympian metaphor. It's admission. Pride in coaching is a heavy thing. Public humiliation is heavier still. But humility, real humility, doesn't wallow. It organizes. McDaniel's answer wasn't a surrender. It was an inventory. He didn't scapegoat players or question officiating. He named the fans' pain and named the remedy: returning value. That's not a promise the public can bank on. It's a metric to be measured. Show up, do the drills, make the calls simple enough that your line can block them. Turn penalties into corrections, win a quarter, win a week, win back a few thousand hearts in the cheap seats. And yet, the press box is unforgiving. The numbers, 2-7, are a cold argument. Is it still acceptable for leadership to ask for time? Or does that time become the luxury of a franchise that's already eaten enough patience from its supporters? Fans don't negotiate with nuance in the moment. They react. They boo. Owners watch social feeds and calculate reputational cost. The choice to keep McDaniel for the season is, for Ross in the front office, a political one as much as a football decision. It signals hope that continuity will stabilize performance. It also signals risk. Every loss grows louder and makes the argument for change easier. McDaniel's words are not just a coach's philosophy. They're a contract renewal by narrative. He needs wins to make that contract stick. Honestly, what could happen next reads like a checklist and a thriller at once. First, simplify. If the offensive line can't sustain complex protections, call plays that reduce time to throw and ask your receivers to win with precision rather than invention. Second, accountability. The locker room must close ranks or it will splinter. Private reprimands work if they create visible corrections in public play. Third, the front office must sign players who can execute the basics, not just flash skills. If that alignment happens, McDaniel's do the work becomes a real program. If it doesn't, his words will become a refrain in a season's obituary. There's also an emotional ledger here. Fans will remember that night for the sorrow or the turning point it becomes. Players will remember how their coach handled the booing. Did he rail against them, or did he quietly march the group back to the practice field and demand better? The team's response in the following week will be the most revealing play call of all. Most coaches who survive public humiliation do so by producing calm and clarity after the storm. They don't rely on speeches, they rely on films of improvement, fewer penalties, cleaner snaps, more consistent pocket time. The narrative flips not because someone delivers a line in a press conference, but because the scoreboard and the tape tell a different story. McDaniel's honesty buys him nothing without that proof. And the fans, they want to be courted back. Fans forgive if they feel respected. That's the friction McDaniel must reduce. Saying it sucks is the beginning, not the cure. The real currency will be the small rituals of repair. Halftime adjustments that stick, substitutions that stabilize, micro improvements that add up to competitive football. Turn the boo into a murmur and then into applause. That's the alchemy. If you want a final picture, imagine McDaniel after practice, not under the lights, but in the empty stadium, watching film with assistants, pointing at a tape and saying to himself and them the same line he gave reporters. Work. Not poetry. Not excuses. Just a ledger of corrections. That's the quiet, honest response the boos demand. He didn't promise miracles. He promised a return to fundamentals. And in sports, the most radical thing a leader can say sometimes is the humblest. We will do the work. You could feel it in the air at Hard Rock, the sound of a season losing its temper, 10,000 small betrayals, missed assignments, penalties, a false start at a crucial moment, a stadium that stopped believing. Then the boos arrived, loud and patient, and the head coach walked into the postgame room with the kind of quiet that carries a headline. Yeah, personally, you want to dictate the terms, Mike McDaniel said. You want to fix stuff, and yeah, it sucks. That sucks. It was short, honest, and more dangerous than a long defense, because it showed he heard the crowd and he knew why they were right to be angry. SI. The context makes that line land like thunder. The Dolphins lost 28-6 to the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, a game that should have been about flashes of hope and instead became a forensic report on how mistakes compound. The franchise also made a seismic front office move. General manager Chris Grier and the team mutually agreed to part ways, and Champ Kelly stepped in as interim GM. Yet in the same breath, the organization publicly decided to keep McDaniel on through the rest of the season. That split, GM gone, coach spared for now, feels deliberate and strange at the same time, Roder. Listen, firing a GM and keeping a coach is the owner saying, we don't like the cataloger, we want a different architect. It's an ownership-level choice to change the people who build the team while leaving the person who runs the day-to-day. But for fans who booed, that nuance is cold comfort. They hear the loss column, 2-7, and they see a roster that looks patched and confused. They want accountability that feels immediate and public patience for a coach who once looked like a creative savior now reads like a gamble on goodwill. Reuters' McDaniel's answer about the crowd was exactly the kind of non-defense teams need in public moments. Minimal spin, maximum ownership of the problem. He didn't point fingers upward or away. He told the room the obvious truth. Fans enjoy winning, and the team failed to give them that joy. But tone matters as much as truth. Saying it sucks to a locker room and city that has already been swallowing excuses is one thing. Saying it in front of a microphone while the owner already reshuffles the front office is another. That's a ledger entry in a long-running ledger, and people add up ledgers fast. NBC Sports noms. Then there's the quarterback drama. Tua Tagovailoa after the game said Ravens fans maybe got a little muffled with my cadence, an observation that reads either like a technical note or a misstep in tone, depending on where you sit. Fans heard it as deflection. The quarterback who once carried Miami's hopes now risks sounding like a man who blames the environment for his own miscues. In a city that invested in him with optimism and money, that will not age well. Leaders are forgiven if they own mistakes. Leaders get thrown to the wolves when they blame circumstances. SI shy. This is where the football and the theater collide. The roster problems, an inconsistent offensive line, a leaky secondary, a team that makes self-inflicted mistakes, are real and solved mostly by time, personnel moves, and shrewd drafting. Owners fire GMs when they think the drafts and signings are bad. They fire coaches when they think the play calling or preparation is the issue. Miami's owner just moved against the GM. He kept the coach. That decision buys McDaniel time. But time isn't the same as immunity. The next 6 weeks are an audit, visible improvement, or an inevitable course correction. Reuters, what should McDaniel do on Monday? First, simplify. When a team's fundamentals are fraying, the answer is not more schematic bravado, it's cleaner demands, fewer bells and whistles, and more practice reps on the small stuff. Make the cadence work by practicing it in loud room simulations. Cut the pre-snap chaos. Make the offensive line's night-to-night assignment sheet something players can memorize, not improvise. Second, own the narrative publicly. Apologies matter less than visible fixes. Walk the city through the plan. This is what we changed. This is who's getting extra reps. This is exactly how we'll stop the penalties. Third, lean on the bye. Use it to rebuild health and rhythm and to show concretely that the team is not adrift. Fans will forgive results faster than words, but you can't get the results without disciplined, boring work. NBC Sports. For the front office and the interim GM, the math is ugly but